হ্যালো, আচ্ছা, একজন স্টেজ ভলেন্টিয়ার বা একজন হল ভলেন্টিয়ার এক্ষুনি মঞ্চে এসে আমার সাথে দেখা করুন।
CC member ഒന്നും നിലയിലല്ലേ, അത് സെൻട്രൽ എക്സിക്യൂട്ടീവ് കമ്മിറ്റി മറ്റതല്ലാതെ വെറും ഡെലിഗേറ്റ് അതൊക്കെ തരാം. പിന്നെ നമ്മൾ ആദ്യം പ്രസൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോഴേ ഒന്ന് രണ്ട് സെൻറ്റൻസ് എനിക്ക് വേണം, തെറ്റരുതല്ലോ. ഇനാഗുറേഷനൊക്കെ വിളിക്കുന്നത് എങ്ങനെയാണ് വിളിക്കുന്നത് പറഞ്ഞേ? അതെ അതെ. This type for inauguration എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ മതിയല്ലോ. ഐ അല്ല, ഇവർ ഇനാഗുറേറ്റ് ചെയ്യാൻ ആളുകൾ വിളിക്കുന്നത് ശശികുമാർ. ഓക്കെ, ഐ ഇൻവൈറ്റ് ശശികുമാർ അങ്ങനെ തന്നെ പറഞ്ഞാൽ മതി. ഒന്ന് ശ്രദ്ധിച്ചോളണേ, മിസ്റ്റേക്ക് ഫിൽ ചെയ്യാണെങ്കിൽ എനിക്ക് വാട്സാപ്പ്.
স্টেজ ভলেন্টিয়ার যারা আছেন দুজন বলছে।
അതുപോലെ ഈ മാർട്ടിയേഴ്സിനെ കുറിച്ച് 2-3 പേര് സാധനം എനിക്കിന്ന് ടെസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നു. മാർട്ടിയേഴ്സിൻ്റെ ഫാമിലീസ് ഹക്കാൻ മിഥിലാജ്. May you invite them? Okay. Okay. They delegate. അല്ല, മാറ്റി 2-3 സെൻറ്റൻസ് മതി, വേണ്ടി വരില്ല. ചിലപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് തന്നെ ഹാൻഡിൽ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. അതർവൈസ് നമുക്ക് അതിരിക്കും നല്ലതാണ്. ഒരു 4-5 മതി. അവരെ വിളിക്കും. അവർ ഓണർ ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയമാണ്. അവർ ഓണർ ചെയ്യാൻ പറയുമ്പോൾ ചിലപ്പോൾ അത് വേണ്ടി വരും. അതൊന്ന് ടൈപ്പ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നാൽ മതി. ചിലപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് തന്നെ ഒന്ന് ഹാൻഡിൽ ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റും. കോൺഫറൻസ് റൗണ്ട് ചോദിക്കുന്നതേ. ഓക്കെ, നീ നോക്കിയിരുന്നാൽ മതി. എന്തെങ്കിലും ഉണ്ടെങ്കിൽ ഒന്ന് ടെക്സ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തിരുന്നാൽ മതി. അതിനകത്ത് റിപ്പീറ്റ് ചെയ്യാതിരിക്കാമല്ലോ. ഇരുന്നോളൂ, കുഴപ്പമില്ല. ആ ഡ്രൈവറുടെ നമ്പർ ഞാൻ അയച്ചുതരാമേ. ഡ്രൈവറുടെ നമ്പർ. ഓ ശരി.
अच्छा कॉमरेड, हॉल के बाहर ये इजेडसीसी के अंदर ये कुछ लोग पानी का बोतल फेंक रहा है, ये नहीं करना चाहिए हमें. और इनसाइड द हॉल गुटखा एनी टाइप ऑफ फूड इज नॉट अलाउड. तो सभी डेलीगेट को मैं ये अनुरोध करता हूं, ये जो नियम है ये लेके चलना पड़ेगा हमारा कॉन्फ्रेंस में. সুশীতল দেবের খালি পরিবার নবারুণ সামনে নিয়ে চলে এসো না। মিথিলাজ হক মোহাম্মদ আছে এখানে, ওনাদের ফ্যামিলির লোকেরা আছেন, মইদুলের মাও আছেন সামনেই। ঠিক আছে, अच्छा comrades and delegate, now we are starting our 11th All India Conference, Democratic Youth Federation of India. ये कॉन्फ्रेंस आज से 15 तारीख तक चलेगा. ये कॉन्फ्रेंस चलाने के लिए जो कमिटीज है इसका प्रपोजल मैं आपके सामने रखता हूं. प्रेसिडियम कॉमरेड ए रहीम, कॉमरेड मीनाक्षी मुखर्जी, Comrade Palas Bhaumik, Comrade Bala Bhelan, Comrade Sanjay Paswan, Comrade Kumud Dev Burma.
I support this proposal.
Resolutions Committee, Comrade Preeti Sekhar, Convener, Jack C. Thomas, Bhupendra Gujar, Irfan Gul.
Demonstration of wire cast.
I again support this proposal.
Credential Committee, Comrade V.K. Sanoj, Convener, Comrade Ibrahim Ali, Comrade Venkatesh from Telangana, Comrade Santosh Chaudhary from Jharkhand, Comrade Laxi Samantul from Maharashtra.
I support this proposal.
Minutes Committee, Comrade Sanjeev Delhi, Comrade Sahanaj Haryana, Comrade Naresh Jadhav Bihar, Comrade Rito Ranjan Das Assam, Comrade Y. Ramsi Andhra Pradesh.
I support this proposal.
And rest of the secretariat member will be the steering committee. This is my proposal, comrade.
What are the proposal who elected for presidium and all other committee?
Wire cast.
Please take your charge with immediate effect. All of the proposed comrades, you please come to the dais.
Now I requested our guests, please come on the dais. The reception committee chairman, 𝒃𝒊𝒂𝒏𝒕 𝒂𝒃𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 please come on the dais. Our founder general secretary, Comrade Hannan Munna, our former All India President, Comrade M.A. Baby, our former General Secretary Tapas Sinha, SFI former General Secretary Nilatpal Basu, the CITU All India General Secretary Comrade Tapan Sen, SFI General Secretary Comrade Mayuk Biswas, and you know ke 10 conference to 11 conference, DYFI 7 comrade Martyr comrade. Comrade Mithilaj, Comrade Haq Muhammad, Comrade Abdul Rauf, Comrade Sanup, Comrade Susital Dev Burma from Tripura, Comrade Ashok from Tamil Nadu, and Comrade Moidul Islam Midda from our West Bengal. So I request our Martyr family comrades, their relatives, you also please come on the dais. And Comrade Muhammad Riaz, you also please come on the dais.
Demonstration
Please.
of wire cast.
যারা হল ভলেন্টিয়ার আছে তাদেরকে বলছি এই মিনিটস কমিটির এখানে এক্ষুনি 3টে চেয়ারের ব্যবস্থা করতে হবে। হল ভলেন্টিয়ারকে বলছি এক্ষুনি মিনিটস কমিটির এখানে 3টে চেয়ারের ব্যবস্থা করতে হবে।
Demonstration of wire cast.
Comrade M.A. Baby and the family members from the martyrs, please come on the dais.
Demonstration of wire cast. Demonstration of wire cast.
When he was right. Now come to Calcutta, he used to
Demonstration of Wirecast.
we are celebrating 99 years of Vietnam.
𝒃𝒊𝒈𝒈𝒆𝒄 is over.
This is the first test. Yes, he came in. Yes, that is his birthday.
Comrades, all delegates and guests,
A demonstration of Wirecast.
our associating president, Comrade A.A. Rahim, present the Martyr resolution.
Homage to martyrs. The 11th All India Conference of Democratic Youth Federation of India salutes all the brave martyrs who have sacrificed their lives in the defense of democracy, left ideology, and fighting for the people's rights. The conference also expresses solidarity with the fighting comrades all over the world. This conference salutes and pays homage to the brave activists and leaders, including several women of the youth movement and democratic movement in West Bengal and Tripura, who have been murdered by Trinamool Congress and 𝒃𝒊𝒈𝒂𝒏𝒏𝒆 goons and anti-social elements, respectively. The conference pays homage to and salute all the courageous comrades who have been killed by the Congress and RSS in Kerala.
Wirecast.
11th Conference salute to memory of Comrade Maidul Islam Midya, DYFI activist from Bengura, West Bengal, who was killed due to police lathi charge during Nabana Abhijan on February 15, 2021. This conference salutes the memory of Comrade 𝒂𝒒𝒊𝒂𝒂𝒍, DYFI leader of Tripura, who was killed by BJP goons. 11th Conference salutes the memory of Comrade M. Ashok, Democratic Youth Federation of India, Tirunelveli District Committee Treasurer, who was hacked to death by some upper caste community gang on June 14, 2019. 11th Conference salutes the memory of Comrade Sanoop, who was brutally murdered by RSS criminals on 4th October 2020. Comrade Sanoop was the Joint Secretary of the Democratic Youth Federation of India, Chovanur Area Committee in Thrissur District in Kerala. He was killed by RSS. This conference salutes the memory of Comrade Abdur Rahman Rao, who was murdered by Indian Union Muslim League criminals on 23rd October 2020. Comrade was a DYFI activist from Kanjangadu, Kasaragod district in Kerala. The conference salutes the memory of Comrade Haq Muhammad and Comrade Mithilaj, who were hacked to death by Congress criminals in Thembamudu, Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala on 30th August 2020, the Onam event. Haq Muhammad was Kalingumukham, Democratic Youth Federation of India Unit President, and Mithilaj was DYFI activist of Tevalakadu Unit, Manikal Panchayat. Comrade, we can stand for a minute and pay homage for them.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Next, condolence resolution will be placed by Comrade Balavelan.
Demonstration of Wirecast.
Condolence resolution. The 11th All India Conference of DYFI deeply mourns the loss of its beloved leaders and activists,
as well as stalwarts and martyrs of the left and democratic movement who sacrificed their entire life in the struggle for a more equal and just society. This period after last conference in 2017 was ridden by pandemic. This conference mourned the death of lakhs of people who died in the COVID pandemic. This conference pays homage to the brave martyr comrade Abhimanyu, who was stabbed to death by Popular Front activities in Maharaja's College in Ernakulam on June 2, 2018. Comrade Abhimanyu, a 16-year-old SFI activist who was stabbed to death in Kerala's Alappuzha district by RSS, and Comrade Dheeraj Rajendran, SFI activist who was stabbed to death at the Government Engineering College, Idukki on January 10, 2002 by Youth Congress goons. This conference dips its banner in memory of Father Stan Swami, the Jesuit victim of the authoritarianism of Modi government in jail in Taloja in Mumbai. George Ferrell Floyd Jr., who was killed by the police officer in Minneapolis in United States by kneeling on Floyd's neck and back for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. Senior journalist Gauri Lankesh, who was activist, murdered 5th September 2017 in Bangalore by Hindutva goons. Anis Khan, a student activist studying journalism from Kalyani University, was killed by Mamta's police 9th February 2022. Burman and Rajesh Sarkar, two ITA students who were killed by Mamta's police in North Dinajpur. Police Inspector Subhash Kumar Singh, who was investigating officer in the Dabri mob lynching incident, was killed in Bulandshahr in Uttar Pradesh by Bajrang Dal activists, creating a riot-like situation. Journalist Ram Kashyap, who was killed by BJP goons in Lakshmipur, Karij. 7 other farmers who were killed in Lakshmi Karij, and Danish Sittik, an Indian photojournalist based in Delhi, who used to lead the National Reuters media team, was killed while reporting for a war-ridden Afghanistan. The 11th All India Conference also mourned the death of the women and people belonging to Dalit and minority community who were victims of various kinds of atrocities and lost their lives. The 11th conference, its homage to memory of Comrade Ajit Kumar, DYFI Kumbala Black Committee member from Kerala, who died while trying to push out the youth who was drowning in a river. We also pay homage to Comrade Esther Judith, a DYFI activist from Kerala, who died in an accident. Comrade Santi Raj, DYFI activist from Anuchala Mode Black, Kollam, Kerala. Comrade Anurjit, DYFI Irinjambada Unit. Comrade Pradeep Savan, DYFI Gadkabur Unit Secretary from Mumbai. Vinayak Bairi, a Taluka Committee member from Solapur, Maharashtra. Comrade Yogesh Jadhav, a DYFI Surgana Taluka Committee member, Maharashtra. Kavita Kantu, DYFI activist, Himachal Pradesh. DYFI volunteers from Kerala who lost their lives amidst COVID relief activity. Comrade K.R. Sajis, Anil Kumar, S.R. Asa, and Enston Abraham. The 10th conference dips its banner in memory of Comrade Nirbam Sen, Industry and Commerce Minister in the left-front government in West Bengal. K. Varadarajan, peasant leader from Tamil Nadu. Vijantar, working class leader from Tripura. Gautam Das, leader from Tripura. Syamal Chakrabarti, the leader of working class movement from West Bengal. Magendra Singh, former secretary of the DYFI in Maharashtra and working class leader. Vidal More, founder president of the DYFI in Maharashtra. Comrade Mallu Swarajyam, legendary fighter of Telangana People's Armed Struggle, Ganesankar Vidyarthi, Freedom Struggle activist and communist leader, Gurudas Gupta, working class leader, Ashok Mitra, prominent economist and the former minister in the West Bengal Lieutenant government, Somnath Chatterjee, former speaker, eminent parliament, K.R. Gauriamma, former minister and politician, M. Karunanidhi, veteran of the Dravidian movement, DMK president and former chief minister of Tamil Nadu, Ranjan Narula, trade union leader, Maithili Sivaraman, women's rights leader, Mogar Singh, founder secretary of DYFI Himachal Pradesh, P. Biju, former DYFI leader from Kerala, M.C. Josephine, women's rights leader, Sheila Jithit, former chief minister of Delhi, and 𝒗𝒊𝒅𝒆𝒑, former cabinet minister. We mourn the death of Ijaz Ahmed, well-known Marxist theoretician and intellectual. Samir Amin, renowned Marxist thinker. Stephen Hawking, famous physicist. Desmond Tutu, anti-apartheid activist. Kofi Annan, ex-United Nations Secretary General. Pranab Mukherjee, former president. Professor D.N. Jha, renowned Marxist historian. Musrul Hassan, noted historian. Chris Arnott, progressive writer, director, theatre personality and actor. Toni Morrison, famous black woman writer. 𝒊𝒒𝒑 𝒒𝒐𝒏𝒕, renowned actor, playwright, poet and lifelong associate with the left movement. Rogat Intaredi, renowned poet. Krishnan Sabdi, renowned Hindi fiction writer. Shivakumar Sharma, famous road activist. S.B. Balasubramanian, noted singer and musician. 𝒃𝒆𝒒 Lalita, renowned theatre and film actress. Diego Maradona, Simon Brito, writer and former student leader. Thanu Padmanabhan, renowned astrophysicist. ECG Sudarshan, renowned scientist. Pandit Jesraj, renowned Hindustani vocalist. Pandit Birju Maharaj, famous Kathak and artist. Famous film and other cultural personalities. Dilip Kumar, Radha Mankeshwar, Nedumudi Venu, Irfan Khan, Susat Singh, Dr. Sriram Lago, Punit Rajkumar, Kalpana Rajmi, Mirinal Sen, Kim Ki Duck, Kader Khan, Sagar Sadgadi, Kadri Gopalnath, Rishi Kapoor, Rajiv Kapoor, Lenin Rajendran, Vanraj Bhatia, Siddharth Shukla and 𝒄𝒉𝒂𝒓𝒅, famous sports personalities. Paolo Rossi, Milkha Singh, Yashpal Sharma and Ajit Vadavkar. This conference expressed its grief over the gruesome killings and torture perpetrated by Sangh Parivar activists in Kerala and other places, by BJP hooligans and Tripura, and by the DMC goons in West Bengal on ordinary people and leaders and activists of left and democratic movement. This conference mounts the innocent victims of cow vigilation, Tabras Ali and other victims of communal and caste violence in various states. We express our acute anger and grief and pay tributes to the victims of imperialist attack across the world. Peoples who died while death of innocent civilians trying to migrate to escape war. Farmers who were killed in the Lakshmipur Heri incident. Death of innocent killings of civilians in the Kashmir killed by terrorists and armed forces. Innocent people killed in Delhi carnage in 2020 and soldiers who died in the Indo-China border conflict. Farmers who lost their lives during the one-year-long farmers' protest in Delhi borders. Lakhs of people who succumbed to the COVID in the last 2 years in India and the world, and hundreds of children and others who died in public hospitals due to carelessness of government authorities. The 11th conference expressed its deep sympathies for the victims of cyclones and floods in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Maharashtra, West Bengal, Uttarakhand and other natural calamities. This conference pays tribute to all those who have given up their life for the cause of the rights of the oppressed at the national and international level. It resolved to carry on their legacy by completing the tasks undertaken by them to build a just and egalitarian society.
Stand a minute for comments.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Comrades, now the time for welcome speech. 𝒂𝒊𝒈𝒂𝒓𝒅. He is a famous actor in Bengali film industry. He is the chairman of our reception committee of this conference. I would like to welcome Comrade 𝒂𝒊𝒈𝒂𝒓𝒅 to deliver his welcome speech.
Of Wirecast.
Dear comrades, on behalf of the reception committee, we heartily welcome all the delegates, observers and guests who are attending the 11th All India Conference of the Democratic Youth Federation of India. We wish this conference a grand success. We, proud as we are of the rich cultural heritage of our state, would try to showcase a little of that wealth. During the left front government, our state had made remarkable progress in the fields of agriculture, education, culture, industrialization, and employment generation. Even the venue of this very conference is an area that is a mark of success of the left front government. This Salt Lake and Newtown area is not only an example of modern town planning, but was once seen as one of the epicenters of employment generation in the state. Then followed the ongoing misrule of the TMC, which has severely imperiled our system of education, condition of employment, the rich heritage of art, and so on. But in spite of being besieged so ruthlessly, we soldier on.
Of Wirecast.
To make the people's voice heard, we march every day, undaunted by the constant threats and attacks. The march now has brought us here, to this conference venue named after the legendary Diego Maradona, who was leftist not only in his football, but also in his political belief. That he dared to question the exploiters and the powers that be is a constant inspiration to us. This conference pays warm tribute to all those martyrs who gave their lives in struggles against reactionary forces. In our state, Comrade Moidul Islam Midda lost his life in a rally demanding employment. TMC goons killed DYFI activist Comrade Bidut Mondol. In Kerala, Comrade Haq Muhammad, Comrade Mithilaj, Comrade Sanud, Comrade Abdul Rahman became martyrs fighting against the reactionary forces. In Tamil Nadu, Comrade Ashok was assassinated, and in Tripura, they have killed Comrade 𝒂𝒊𝒈𝒂𝒍. Anis Khan was killed because he had dared to protest the misdeeds of the Trinamool leaders. But the DYFI activists have proved that these killings do not stop them, only make them stronger.
Demonstration
And that
of
is why our
wirecast.
protests and agitations never fail to make the rulers tremble. The fight against corruption is gaining force every day in cities and villages, but this fight also comes with a cost. Several of our activists are facing hostilities of the ruling class, having to leave their homes, being jailed, getting fatally assaulted while waging this fight, but the fight continues.
Demonstration of wirecast.
Now is the hour of resistance. From demanding justice for Moidul, Biddut and Onish to organizing struggles seeking their fair access to education and employment, no hostility could daunt our march. During the pandemic, both the BJP government at the center and as well as the TMC government in our state completely abandoned the people. During those unforeseen days of hardship, our young comrades, the Red Volunteers, stood by the people risking their own lives. From arranging oxygen and medical supplies for the patients to running community kitchen and COVID helplines. Everything that the elected governments failed to do were carried out by our Red Volunteers. On behalf of the reception committee, we salute the Red Volunteers from this stage. We salute all our innumerable comrades across the country who are participating in struggles to demand education, gender rights, jobs, social justice, sustainable environment. As we meet for the conference, this year marks the 75th anniversary of our country's independence. Bengal has been the home to some glorious names in the history of our freedom movement, like Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Master Da Sujya Sen, Binoy Badal Dinesh, Khudiram Bose, Matungini Hajra, Prafullo Chaki, Muzaffar Ahmed, Ganesh Ghosh, Subodh Rai, and many others. But the idea of India put forward by these great fighters is faced with steep challenges today. The ideas of secularism, inclusiveness, freedom of thought and speech enshrined in our constitution are under political as well as ideological attack by the Hindutva fundamentalists. We are sure the 11th All India Conference of the DYFI will resolve to fight and defeat these perils. It must also be mentioned that this year marks the completion of the birth centenary of Satyajit Ray. In fact, this is the 101st year. One of the tallest intellectuals ever born in our country, and perhaps the first filmmaker to take Indian cinema to the world audience. Dear comrades, we must mention here that it would not have been possible for us to prepare for the conference without those thousands of common people of our state who stood beside us in this endeavor. The reception committee takes this opportunity to extend our warm greeting to all of them. It was from the 5th All India Conference that the progressive youth of our country had declared, socialism is the future. The future is ours. May the global fight to achieve socialism intensify. May the fight of the DYFI to build a secular India with equitable access to education and employment for its youth grow from strength to strength. Dear comrades, on behalf of the reception committee and also the people of West Bengal, we wish your conference a grand success. Long live revolution, long live socialism.
Comrade 𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒂𝒏𝒆𝒍, our General Secretary, will felicitate.
This is a demonstration of wirecast.
Comrade Aboida will felicitate Comrade 𝒃𝒊𝒂𝒓𝒅 Chakrabarti. Comrade. Next, the time for inauguration and inaugural address. Sri Shashi Kumar. He is a journalist with a distinguished career and the founder of the Asianet and the founder of Media Development Foundation, the trust which runs the famous Asian School of Journalism in Chennai. I invite esteemed journalist Shashi Kumar to inaugurate our 11th All India Conference of Democratic Federation of India.
Comrades and friends, at the outset I bow before the memory of
Wirecast.
the martyrs whose names were mentioned here just a short while back, who have, with their ultimate sacrifice, shown that the grit, the courage, the fortitude of the soldiers of revolution can never be suppressed by those who do not wish a better society, a transformation, a better future for humanity. The 11th National Conference of the Democratic Youth Federation of India takes place in a context at a time when the core human values and cardinal principles of humanity, of those who strive for a better world, a more equitable world, a more just world, are under challenge as perhaps never before in recent memory. DYFI becomes 4 letters which are red letters for the future of mankind. The letters denote, each one of them, a saga of struggle, a saga of courage, a saga of hope, a saga of determination to a future that the millennial generation, the new generation, will resolve to safeguard. D stands for democratic, for democracy. And democracy is beleaguered today. We don't need to be reminded of that. Democracy is undergoing a huge challenge. Indeed, there are international organizations which audit democracies across the world, like Freedom House, who have recently categorized Indian democracy, particularly after or under the watch of the BJP government at the center, as not a democracy, but as an elected autocracy. This is not what we are saying. This is what those who are auditing democracies across the world are saying. Our Constitution, which is the cornerstone of our republic and also keeps the flame of democracy alive, is being threatened on a daily basis, is being eroded on a daily basis, because the Constitution becomes a hindrance, becomes a nuisance for those who want to conduct an electoral autocracy as against a democracy. It is important at this juncture to remind ourselves that we are a democracy after struggle towards nationhood. We are a democracy which has been achieved by the blood and sacrifice of the people of India, of those whose names were enumerated here just a short while back, and people like them, who wanted a future for humanity which is equitable, which is just, which is inclusive, which is secular.
Of Wirecast.
What we are seeing today is a challenge to each and every one of these ideas of India. We have seen a big challenge to our democracy in terms of the political tradition of our democracy. Democracy does not mean the tyranny of the majority. Democracy does not mean ipso facto majoritarian rule, although, of course, in an electoral democracy, the majority matters. The majority matters to protect the minority. The majority matters to safeguard the core principles of democracy. The majority becoming a tyranny by itself is one of the paradoxes of the political process that we have to warn against. It is precisely against this that as far back as Plato, for instance, had only two concepts of rule. One is an oligarchic rule by the rich, and the other is a democratic rule by the poor. Democracy was seen as ruled by the poor. That was the initial concept of democracy, in the Platonic concept of democracy. As against which there was the rule by the aristocracy, which is called an oligarchy. It did not matter who had the bigger numbers, because in those days, democracy was qualified. Slaves, for instance, were not part of those who could rule. It was not universal suffrage like now. But even so, irrespective of the numbers, rule by the poor was democracy, rule by the rich was autocracy, period. We have evolved from that. We have reached a stage where we are speaking about universal suffrage, the rights of the entire mankind, the rights of all who are included in a democratic process. But we are seeing today a challenge to that very idea.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
We are seeing today the idea of the separation of powers, which is in our Constitution, being challenged in a very, very serious manner. After all, it was Montesquieu in the 18th century who discovered the idea that power is divisible. Until then, the assumption was the divine right theory of kingship, the divine right theory of power, that power was not divisible. And once Montesquieu said power is divisible and divided it into, and discovered the divisibility as in the form of the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the threefold division of power, the idea of the arrogation of power in one person or in one institution collapsed. The idea that I am the state, as King Louis XIV proclaimed, or after me the deluge, as King Louis XIV proclaimed, collapses. It is against that idea that Montesquieu's propagation or propounding the theory of the separation of powers, the division of powers, that power is divisible, that power is not indivisible, comes. And it is from that that the idea of separation of powers, which is enshrined in our Constitution as a basic feature of our Constitution, takes shape. And what is the core essence of that separation of powers? It is one of checks and balances, that the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, and by extension I will add, as a media practitioner, the fourth estate or the fourth pillar of democracy, have a check and balance function. Each of them puts restraints on the other. Each of them invigilates the other, and thereby keeps the democratic process, the democratic edifice vibrant and alive and meaningful. Today, why are we called an electoral autocracy? Because the executive has appropriated, by and large, the powers of the legislature, particularly at the center, at central government. Look at what is happening in Parliament. Bills are rushed through, hustled through, without debate or discussion. Because that is the fiat, that is the order of the executive, that is the wish of the executive. A legislature does not dance to the tune of the executive. The executive, in fact, is supposed to implement the will of the legislature. That has always been the dual function of power and law. Law is made by the legislature, the executive implements that law. But the same law restrains the power of the executive through the judiciary, through courts of law. We have seen the need, the context, increasingly, for courts of law to intervene against excessive power of the executive. The most recent case being, of course, in the context of the sedition case. The role of the Supreme Court is indeed welcome in freezing, shall we say, the functioning of sedition, particularly the law of 124A under the IPC, under which many young people, and that's of significance to this forum, young people are spending time behind bars. Not that old people spending time behind bars is excusable, but a characteristic feature of this is young people who have had the courage, the fortitude to speak out, or even the common sense to speak out, are put behind bars for as little as criticizing, let us say, the role of the government in tackling COVID, for which sedition was charged against a media practitioner. He's not essentially of the left like Vinod Dua, or of speaking about the need to support the farmers' agitation and creating what's called a toolkit for that. A young woman, a student like Disha Ravi, or of a journalist who goes to investigate a terrible case of rape in UP, in Hathras, of a Dalit woman, Siddiq Kapan, or of, students, 4 students in Agra from Kashmir, who happened to celebrate victory of another nation over India in cricket, or of students of JNU, who were beleaguered, like Umar Khalid and others. All of these people booked under sedition. If this is not a totalitarian rule implementing a draconian law, what is? And therefore, it is significant for the DYFI particularly to realize that these are laws which are bearing down, the brunt of it is this is a very significant development, is against the students, is against the youth. Not for participating in a guerrilla struggle or for armed struggle or armed violence, but for a caricature, but for speaking out against an injustice, for writing about it in a forum, for something as simple as that. A draconian, obsolete colonial law of sedition was being enforced. It was on the statute books, which was of course a crime. The previous Congress government did nothing to remove it, and it continued. But the spurt of the cases in the last, since 2014, since the BJP came to power, is remarkable. 13,000 people are spending their time in jail under this law, as 𝒃𝒊𝒈𝒂𝒓𝒄 pointed out in the hearing in the Supreme Court. 300 odd cases booked, 60%, 70% of it over the last few years. So this is the acute nature of that law. And therefore, the first challenge to the Constitution, the democracy, is the challenge against this control, this check and balance function between what you call power on the one hand and law on the other. We have seen also how they have been playing havoc with other aspects of our democratic functioning. The role of the press, for instance. Intrusion into the lives, private lives of individuals. I'm a petitioner, I have been a petitioner even in the sedition case and intervention petition. I'm a direct petitioner along with my colleague N. Ram in the Pegasus case, where a spy malware has been illegally used
This is a demonstration
to
of
harvest
Wirecast.
information about each of us without our knowledge. On your mobile phone, which now is there in everybody's hands literally, the moment you use a mobile phone, everything that you do is being seen and heard. Texts that you send are being monitored. A text that you draft and don't send and erase is also being monitored in order to know, or arrive at the conclusion that this was your intention.
Wirecast.
They're not just reading your mind, they're also reading your intention. They're not just going into what you're doing, but what you're likely to do. This is the kind of profiling, the criminal profiling of citizens of India that the Indian state, as it is now very, very obvious, or a part of the Indian state, we do not know which agency specifically now, although we have very, very strong and reasonable doubts.
This is a demonstration of
And there's a committee
Wirecast.
of the Supreme Court appointed by the Supreme Court going into the whole matter, so it may not be right for me to expose the guesses that we have. But it is a fact that this has happened, as has been proven by objective analysis, by those forensic evidence, by those who have looked at these incidents of spyware being planted into your phones, into your iPhones, in order to find out. And this is across a cross-section of society.
Demonstration of Wirecast.
Against doctors, against staff of the Supreme Court, against opposition leaders, of course. So this is the way the citizenry of this country are being handled in this democracy. There is then again, and in that case, in the October 2021 judgment, led by the Chief Justice of India, the Pegasus case, there have been landmark observations which should shame the government against which they were made. That you cannot keep using national security as an excuse at the drop of a hat in order to deprive citizens of their rights. That you cannot create a chilling effect in terms of freedom of speech in this country, which is a guaranteed fundamental right. That in fact, it's not just freedom of speech and expression, but freedom of protection of sources for journalists that is sacrosanct. A judgment which went to that extent.
Demonstration of Wirecast.
Freedom of protection of sources is not even a given right in the United States, which is considered the mother of all press freedoms, if you like. But court continues to point out the sins of omission and commission of the government, but there's an unabashed, thick-skinned government which continues to pursue its agenda, where possible by abrogating, subverting the Constitution, where that's not possible by resorting to what you call autocracy, which means mobocracy, which means street power. It is almost a fact that everyone knows that today institutions are not important. Whether institutions are acknowledged by the mob is what is important. If I make a film, it's not enough for me to just get a censor certificate. I cannot exhibit the film because the mob will threaten to ruin the theater, to beat up people. Nobody will go and watch my film. The Central Board of Film Censors has been made, redundant. They have made a mockery of most of these institutions, which come under the constitutional scheme of things, under the overarching scheme of the Constitution. And therefore, if you cannot legally do what you want to do, if you cannot constitutionally have your way, you will resort to street power. And that is mobocracy, that is autocracy, which is also seen as one of the features of majoritarianism, of majoritarian rule. Majoritarianism in the electoral sense is acceptable. Whoever wins an election should run the government. But majoritarianism and polarization of society for majoritarianism And making that the stock in trade of your political power is what destroys society. And that is what is happening. Surely the youth of India, the millennial generation of India, organizations like the DYFI are not going to stand by as mute spectators to this wanton destruction of all that is sacred and sane and important for our future as a democratic nation. Years back, we have seen one such incident. So this is not the first time that we have seen the aspiration for autocracy, the aspiration to be authoritarian. But we thought the last time we saw it, that was a lesson learned, and India will never go in that path again. The last time we saw that happening was in the 1970s during the emergency. Some of you may not have been there around, but those in my generation will remember that time. When Mrs. Gandhi, through a declared emergency, sought to usurp the powers of the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive, all within herself, shall we say. Today what we have is a similar situation, but far more dangerous and far more insidious, because it is not a declared emergency, it's an undeclared emergency. So much so, you have no recourse to any legal channels against it. By the way, the fact that sedition has been, the sedition bill, the draconian provision of sedition has been put in abeyance should not place us into any complacence. Because in many of these cases, there are multiple charges. You are booked not only under sedition, but also under UAPA. If not UAPA, in some other. So there are other draconian laws as well, which are good enough for the government to continue what it wants to do. And yet, it is a significant token, I think, role or a signal that the judiciary sends out to the executive. So years back during the emergency, in the context of the emergency, in 1980, in the famous Minerva Mills versus Union of India case, Justice Y.V. Chandrachud, who was then the Chief Justice of India, is the father of the current D.Y. Chandrachud, who is a judge in the Supreme Court today. He said, and this is very significant, he said there are 3 articles of the Constitution which make the difference between an India which moves into Tagore's vision of India, a future India, and between the abyss of authoritarianism and autocracy. And those 3 articles were Article 14, Article 19, and Article 21 of the Constitution. Article 14, you know, talks about equality before the law. Article 19, 1A and G speak about freedom of speech and expression. And Article 19.2 speaks about restraints on that freedom. And Article 21 speaks about the right to life and personal liberty. These, he said, are the 3 cornerstones of the Constitution. If they are not intact, if they are not safeguarded, if they are not protected, then the Constitution will kind of unravel. And these are precisely the articles that are under attack under the present BJP regime. In case after case, you see that they are the ones that are targeted. And you find that it is the courts which have to intervene, the legislature plays along. Unfortunately, a good section of the media becomes complicit in the exercise. And therefore, we are in a very, very delicate, difficult situation. We also see a tension being set up among these articles. If I exercise my right, my fundamental right under Article 14, which gives me equality under the law, or Article 19, 1A and G, which gives me the freedom of speech and expression, if I express myself freely and without fear and favor, I do not live to enjoy the fundamental right guaranteed to me under Article 21, which is the right to life and personal liberty. As Gauri Lankesh found out, as Pensare found out, as Kalburgi found out. You pay with your life. If you exercise one of the rights under your fundamental rights, one of your fundamental rights, you forfeit literally the other fundamental right. This tension is deliberately set up so that you do not dare to exercise your fundamental rights. This is called the chilling effect, not just for against press freedom, but against your right to utilize, your right to execute your natural rights and your fundamental rights as a citizen of this country. Which is why Justice Chandrachud said, this is what will separate the Articles 14, 19 and 21.
Of Wirecast.
He says they are the ones which ensure that there is a distinction between the future that Rabindranath Tagore, and what did Tagore say? Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. This new heaven of freedom, said Justice Y.V. Chandrachud specifically, can only be aspired if these three articles, these three fundamental rights of our Constitution are kept intact.
Of Wirecast.
Today, they are under serious challenge. They are beleaguered. And therefore, we have to see how that will play out as well. So under separation of powers, there's a problem. The fundamental rights, there's a problem. And these are the basic features of the Constitution. There's a role, in fact, in the Minerva Mills case was also to protect the basic feature, the basic doctrine of basic feature of the Constitution. Before that, in 1973, this was the 𝒂𝒊𝒈𝒈𝒂𝒓𝒅 versus Union of India, which again spoke about the basic, doctrine of basic feature of the Constitution. The basic feature cannot be touched by a legislature. So the legislature is not touching the basic feature of the Constitution. I am unleashing my street gangs. I'm unleashing my mob to destroy these basic features of the Constitution. That is a threat. We have reached a stage where the difference between Parliament and Executive is thin or non-existent. And that is the danger when that separation of power is not there. Where the Parliament is anticipating the will, the wish of the Executive. If you look at the government affidavit in the recent case, of the sedition case, you will find this conflation, this merging, if you like, of the Executive and the Parliament in the way the affidavit is worded. So these are clear signals that the Constitution is in peril, the Constitution is in danger, and we ought to do what we can to help it, to save it, to salvage it. So this is as far as democracy under DYFI goes. Youth. Youth is, of course, the spring, the hope of our future. And in India, the demographic of youth is the most significant demographic. It's the biggest demographic. 18 to 35, 36, whatever way you broadly define that. That is the biggest section of the demographic of the population, the decisive demographic of the population, which will make a decision, which will make a difference between whether we are going to go the route of civility to a totalitarian regime or retrieve our democratic rights, restore the Constitution to its deserved place. As I said, the names that I enumerated, they were all youth who were incarcerated. Many of them, of course, got relief from the courts, but against whom such draconian laws as sedition and UAPA were sought and were actually enforced. And look at the state of the country. In terms of freedom of speech and expression, a good indicator of that is the World Press Freedom Index, which is done every year by an objective survey conducted by professionals in the media called Reporters Sans Frontiers, the World Press Freedom Index. And the latest one for 2022, what does it show? That we have slipped further to 150th position in the world in terms of a place where press freedom is possible. 150 out of 180 nations.
This is a demonstration
Below
of
us,
Wirecast.
there are only banana republics and places where you can't say anything against anybody. We belong to a club of shame in terms of our record of freedom of speech and expression. So this is again going to be affecting us very, very badly. And then I go to the third part, which is Federation. Democratic Youth Federation of India. Federation
Is a demonstration
today,
of
here and now in
Wirecast.
our context is a very, very important, crucial, critical word. Because India has been conceived as a union of states, not a unitary state. There's a big distinction between the two. A union of states. It's a union of states, as scholars and those who are framers of our constitution have used terms like a union of state with a strong federal bias.
This is
The
a
federal
demonstration
principle was
of
very, very
Wirecast.
strong. When we made a linguistic division of our states, the idea was you will have your distinctive attributes, your distinctive cultures, your distinctive, separateness. It's the whole idea of diversity, unity in diversity. Unity in diversity is not uniformity. Unity in diversity is not a religion by fiat. Unity in diversity can never be a Hindutva uniformity in a country like India. And yet that is sought to be done. It's not only a crime against the constitutional scheme of things, the preamble, very preamble to the Constitution itself, it's also a crime. Hindutva is a crime against Hinduism itself. Hinduism is not a religion which is exclusive in nature. It has all the ages, down the ages, been inclusive, whereas Hindutva is standing it on its head and making it an exclusive religion, making it a religion which is used only in order for electoral gains. It has nothing to do with spirituality. Whether as Marxists we believe in religion or spirituality, it doesn't matter. But it's important to recognize that Hindutva is not even that. It is an insult to the idea of religion. It's an insult to the definition of religion in the Marxian sense, for instance.
This is a demonstration of
The soul of the
Wirecast.
soulless, the cry of the oppressed. It has nothing to do with any of that. And so you find that the federal principle has been hijacked, has been thrown overboard. Governors have become viceroys, like in the colonial era. What is the difference between a governor today and a viceroy in the colonial era? In Tamil Nadu, we have a governor who sat on a bill which affects the millennial generation, a NEET bill, N-E-E-T bill, which the legislature unanimously passes. The governor sits on it or returns it. The legislature passes it again. He sits on it again for a long time, and finally, seeing the writing on the wall, finally passes it on to the president, forwards it to the president. On the other hand, where the governor should take a role, he passes it on to the president. For instance, the right of pardon in a capital punishment. And the Supreme Court had to wrap the knuckles of the Assistant Solicitor General in court, who claimed that only president has the powers of pardon. Supreme Court asked, in which case, all the pardons that were given by governors all these years, were they all illegal? So it's not that they don't know. They are just trying to bulldoze what they think they need to do, irrespective of the law, irrespective of the Constitution. the federal principle is again under a serious threat.
Is a demonstration of
So,
Wirecast.
Democratic Youth Federation, which is why I think the DYFI becomes so significant today. Because each of these ideas are the ideas that need to be rejuvenated, that need to be salvaged first, and need to be put on the agenda, on the table, on the front burner. Because without them, this nation cannot survive as a democracy. We are speaking about an unprecedented, at least for the last 8 to 10 years, 7.8% inflation as I speak today. We are speaking about a country where 142, shall we say, the richest people, have earned something like 30 lakh crores just over the last 1 year. Whereas 84% of the population, their incomes have drastically fallen. We're speaking about
This is a
disguised
demonstration of Wirecast.
and overt, explicit unemployment, which we can experience, which we can see. All of these are not issues of governance anymore. Pure polarization, pure religious polarization, pure cultural polarization, and the myth of a nation state which is out there without relevance to those who belong to it.
Demonstration of Wirecast.
It's significant to remember that the United States of America, which is a federal government, there are many things wrong with the United States of America, but structurally the federal principle is very strong there. It doesn't define itself as a nation state because the Constitution is supreme in the United States. The Constitution is supreme in the United States. Whereas in the Westphalian system, say in Europe, for instance, the idea of nation state evolved in the Westphalian system after the 30 Years' War of 1658 and so on, which is history many of you know. India is not Europe. European states tend to be unitary, tend to be homogeneous, and yet they have a lot of immigrants, there's a lot of intermingling. India is a confederation of states. The federal principle is very, very sacrosanct, is important in the Indian context. But these are being torpedoed, these are being sabotaged,
Is a demonstration
and I
of
think therefore
Wirecast.
the idea of India needs to be revitalized, needs to be thought over, and I'm sure that the Democratic Youth Federation of India is equal to the task. The exemplary manner in which the youth, I was received yesterday I was very happy to see one of my former students of the ACJ, 𝒂𝒆𝒏𝒕, who is a member of the DYFI, who fought an election. He may have lost it, doesn't matter. But we were thrilled when we heard how the younger potential leaders of the left, of the CPIM, their way of campaigning, how they inspired the people, how they created new precedents in terms of campaigning. I think this is the beginning of a change. I have no doubt that organization, the DYFI, is going to be at the vanguard of a struggle, of an ongoing struggle, which will make a transformative change, which is essential, which is imperative for India to survive, not just survive, to flourish and become the true democracy of an equitable, inclusive social order that we all aspire to. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Shashi Kumar. Comrade 𝒂𝒂𝒏𝒕, our General Secretary, will felicitate Sri Shashi Kumar.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Comrade Meenakshi.
Comrades, हम लोग अपने जो मार्टियर्स फैमिली है, जिन लोगों के नाम पर हम लोग हमारा कॉन्फ्रेंस का इस मंच का नामकरण किए हैं, उस मार्टियर्स को हम लोग न्योता भेजे थे, वो लोग यहाँ पर उपस्थित हैं। वी इनवाइट आवर मार्टियर्स फैमिली, दे केम। अभी हम लोग उनका अभिनंदन करेंगे, जो हम लोगों का शहीद थे, उनका जो घर का जो आए हैं, उनको हम फेलिसिटेट करेंगे। यहाँ पर आए हैं फादर ऑफ हक मोहम्मद, एल्डर ब्रदर ऑफ मिथिलाज, मदर ऑफ सुशीतल देव एंड मदर ऑफ मोहिदुल इस्लाम मिद्दा। कोई तो सूद चुकाए, कोई तो जिम्मा ले उस इनकलाब का जो आज तक उधार सा है, जो इनकलाब को आगे ले जाने के लिए जो शहीद, जो हम लोगों का कॉमरेड हर दिन रास्ते का लड़ाई में हम लोगों का काम का, हम लोगों का काज का, हम लोगों का रोज़मर्रे का ज़िंदगी का जो लड़ाई है, वो लड़ाई जो आगे तक ले जा रहे हैं, वो तो अभी साथी हम लोगों के साथ उपस्थित नहीं है, लेकिन उनका फैमिली हम लोगों के साथ है। आज वो उपस्थित हुए हैं। पहले वी आर इनवाइटेड फादर ऑफ हक मोहम्मद, प्लीज कम ऑन स्टेज एंड उनको अभिनंदन और शहीद को सम्मानित करने के लिए हम कॉमरेड 𝒂𝒑 मुखर्जी को रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं। वी रिक्वेस्ट कॉमरेड 𝒂𝒑 मुखर्जी, प्लीज फेलिसिटेट फादर ऑफ हक मोहम्मद। एल्डर ब्रदर ऑफ मिथिलाज, उनको फेलिसिटेट करेंगे कॉमरेड हिमोग्नो राज भट्टाचार्य। एल्डर ब्रदर ऑफ मिथिलाज, वी रिक्वेस्ट टू हिमोग्नो राज भट्टाचार्य, प्लीज फेलिसिटेट आवर मार्टियर फैमिली। আমাদের মধ্যে উপস্থিত আছেন কমরেড সুশীতল দেবের মা। আমরা কমরেড সুশীতল দেবের মাকে অনুরোধ করছি মঞ্চে আসার জন্য, তাকে ফেলিসিটেট করবেন। বালা ভেলেন, উই রিকোয়েস্ট বালা ভেলেন টু ফেলিসিটেট দ্য মাদার অফ সুশীতল দেব, আওয়ার মার্টিয়ার কমরেড সুশীতল দেব ফ্রম ত্রিপুরা। পশ্চিমবঙ্গের আমাদের সাথী, আমাদের লড়াইয়ের সাথী কমরেড মহিদুল ইসলাম মিদ্দা ফরিদদার মা আজ আমাদের মধ্যে উপস্থিত আছেন। ওনাকে ফেলিসিটেট করবেন কমরেড এ রহিম।
Comrade, Comrade, as we know that Comrade PM Muhammad Riaz is the elected president of our organization. Now he is serving as the Minister for Public Work and Tourism of Kerala, the second Pinarayi government. This is very proud for us also. Now, Comrade, just leave from our conference due to his busy schedule. So I invite Comrade PM Muhammad Riaz and Comrade Aboid Mukherjee will felicitate him. Comrade, several fraternal organizations leaders are presented here now. Now I invite Comrade Tabassan, the General Secretary of CIETU, to felicitate this, deliver his speech for our national conference.
Comrades in the Presidium, leaders on the dais and other guests, and the comrade delegates who have assembled in this 11th All India Conference of Democratic Youth Federation of India. On behalf of Center of Indian Trade Unions, I find it my privilege to come here and greet your conference, to wish your conference a big success. Also, as a person, it's a privilege to attend your national conference, just to have a little bit of memories that I have started my collective political life with the youth front. DYFI was then yet to born, but DYF West Bengal is in the process of making. I joined political life while working in the youth front in my locality in Central Calcutta. And I was the witness of the whole process of Democratic Youth Federation in the making in West Bengal, and subsequently it became DYFI. So definitely it's a matter to have that memory again very fresh when I have the occasion to address your conference. Now we are in a very challenging time. So far as our front is concerned, we are trying for keep a continuity of intervention by the working class and gradually widen the united intervention of the working class since last 3 decades, particularly with the onset of neoliberalism, which I believe in the context of very deepening crisis, rather the systemic crisis of this neoliberal order, has given rise or
got reflected in various kind of perversions
of Wirecast.
in the economic system, in the political system, and also in the societal governance. And I believe that it's a response of the neoliberal capitalist bloc to this almost a kind of irrecoverable crisis of the systemic crisis of the neoliberal order, I think which has got reflected in its most barbarous expression of the very alarming level of unemployment, joblessness, and also a process of severe degeneration in the quality of employment, to the extent that it appears that we are going back to the period of the old period of slavery, which the human civilization has combated and tried to put in forth a decent working society also. The present situation appears to have put back the clock back. And I think these are the basic challenges before us, every democratic movement. The kind of authoritarianism which is getting spread in the all-out spread in the economy, in the political governance system, and also in the societal governance. So that is a very big challenge for the entire democratic movement, and I believe the youth movement has got a much bigger role to play, but because that their reflections, their response can create a much bigger sensation in the society, which help in carrying the struggle to a combative stage. So we believe we must work together, and in that sense, this Democratic Youth Federation of India, which believes in a process of a viable alternative to this brutal regime, and for which they are fighting for in all fronts. This conference definitely will be an important exercise to find out ways and means to gaining strength, and also establishing a living link with all the segment of all other social struggle, all other social forces who are in the process of battle. And I think this is the only alternative before us to combat the situation. Just we came out from a 2-day countrywide general strike, where unitedly most of the trade union centers of the country have focused the main slogan that we are not merely fighting for our employment, our rights, our trade union rights, which are all under severe attack. We are fighting for saving the people and saving the nation. It is just when we talk of unemployment, it is just not. Today we are faced with a situation that we are in a position where unemployment is reaching an alarming stage. It is not only that, it is also that the manner the whole policy measures are being executed by this present barbarous fascistic regime, it aims at perpetually destroying the employment absorption capacity of the Indian economy. That is an exercise. Under the leadership of international finance capital, at the dictate of imperialism, the entire economic policy execution is aimed at destroying the employment generating capacity of the third world economy, taking them to a status of the old primary goods exporter countries. That direction they are trying to push. And against that there are struggles going on globally in different countries. Working class are on the forefront in fighting back. But that was the direction. In our country also, if we analyze every stage the Modi government is going to take, that is going to perpetually destroy the employment generation capacity of the economy. These issues we are trying to bring into focus and a regular vocabulary, but till now I don't claim that we are successful in doing so. But our continuous effort must take us into that direction. Only then the people could be roused and a situation can be combated. I don't know, I don't believe that that cannot be combated. I believe that future is ours. I believe this barbarism cannot sustain, and for that our joint exercise is required. At the end, I think this conference will also seriously discuss the initiative that we have already taken. CI2, DYFI and SFI together. We have started this process on the issue of unemployment, job losses and degeneration of the quality of employment, and we believe these are integral. Without that we cannot address the issue, and also will not be able to address the danger, the conspiracy of the perpetuity of the authoritarian rule that has been sought to be imposed on us, both in economy, political and on the society, political system and the society that is in the offing. This issue to be taken together. On that we started some exercise. We have taken certain initiative that was in between part of and after the second and third wave of COVID. Again, we believe that we must renew vigorously that effort, and initial level talks between these three organizations also started. That campaign in the form of much intervening, combative intervention throughout the country, the working class and the students and youth together must go forward. We are already conceived our idea in our National Working Committee, and we are already in the process of dialogue. This conference will also explore on the possibility in the days to come, in a process of another 1.5 years, about the initiative that can be unleashed on this ground throughout the country. We believe that just not by emotion, but by conscious organizational effort, we can combat the situation. And that organized conscious effort jointly by all of us, we have a very enthusing example of a victorious farmer struggle before us. It is possible to defeat them. With that enthusiasm, and the worker peasants joint activities are also going to be a definite narrative in the days to come in the people's movement. So, taken together this initiative, I think we'll be able to establish the fact that the future is ours. Barbarians cannot stand, although they are in the gate. Thank you, comrade. With this, CI2, I wish your conference a big success. We draw inspiration from the spirit you can generate through your conference. Thank you, comrade. Inqilab Jindabad.
Thank you, comrade Tabas. Comrade 𝒉𝒂𝒂𝒅, who is our joint secretary, will felicitate him.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Comrade Hanan Mullah, our founder General Secretary of Democratic Youth Federation of India, founder General Secretary, and now he is the General Secretary of AIKS, and who is the main architect, one of the main architects of the great peasant movement in India. I would like to invite Comrade Hanan Mullah to deliver his speech.
comrades of the Presidium, comrade delegates, and our guest comrades. On behalf of All India Kisan Sabha, I express my revolutionary greetings to the most revolutionary generation of our country, the youth, among which the future struggle and advancement of our country rests. We have full faith in the youth and youth conference. We hope you will, in your conference, we will find new path to change the society. साथियों, मैं आपको स्वागत करता हूं, सबको अभिनंदन करता हूं, क्योंकि आज हिंदुस्तान में जो गहरा संकट के बाद शशि जी ने बताया, जैसा आपका रिपोर्ट में सारे बात लिखा गया है, इस गहरा संकट से हमको देश को बचाना है। आज कोई नारा नहीं है, सिर्फ देश को बचाना है। और इस देश बचाने का नारा के साथ जैसा शशि जी आपको आह्वान किया, आई होप आप इस बात को आगे बढ़ाएंगे। मैं तो 26 साल से नौजवान आंदोलन के साथ था। जब 67 में DYF बना बंगाल में, तब से शुरू से, और 92 तक ऑल इंडिया जनरल सेक्रेटरी के रूप में रहने का यूथ मूवमेंट में लंबा काम किया, और उसी के अनुभव के आधार पर मैं आज किसान सभा में काम कर रहा हूँ। आज आपको मालूम है, हमारा देश का खेती किसी एक गहरा संकट से गुजर रहा है, और ये संकट किसान के तैयार किया हुआ नहीं है। ये संकट के जो आर्किटेक्ट है वो सरकार है। हमारा किसान का संकट कृषि नीति के चलते, क्योंकि आज़ादी का बाद आज तक जो कृषि नीति हुआ है, कोई कृषि नीति किसान आधारित नहीं था। वो धीरे धीरे आज जहां पहुंच गया है, ये कॉरपोरेट आधारित कृषि की ओर देश को लेके जा रहा है। पहले किसान खेती के सेंटर में रहता था, आने वाला दिन में अदानी अंबानी किसान खेती के सेंटर में रहेगा। उत्पादन, उसका प्रोडक्शन, उसका प्रोसेसिंग, उसके एक्सपोर्ट, उसके इंपोर्ट, उसको जो कुछ है एग्रीकल्चर रिलेटेड, सब धीरे धीरे अदानी अंबानी के हाथ में जाने वाला है। इसीलिए नरेंद्र मोदी ये काम करने के लिए, आपको मालूम है, खेती को बर्बाद करने के लिए, खेती को कॉर्पोरेटाइजेशन करने के लिए, खेती को, किसान को हटा के अदानी अंबानी को हाथ में हैंडओवर करने के लिए, वो नरेंद्र मोदी ने काला कानून लाया था। आपको मालूम है, 3 काला कानून भारत में लाया था। जल्दी से जबरदस्ती करके वो काला कानून पारित करने का कोशिश किया था, मगर उसके खिलाफ किसान ने बगावत किया। और ये बगावत आपको मालूम है, जो किसान, सबको, पूरा देश के किसान इकट्ठा हुआ था, लाखों किसान इकट्ठा हुआ था। हम अपना मांग लेके सरकार के पास जाने का ऐलान किया था, मगर दुख की बात है, नरेंद्र मोदी ने बोला आपको दिल्ली आने का हक नहीं है। देश का अन्नदाता, उसको राजधानी में जाने का हक नहीं है। इसके तरह ये क्या है, ये पॉलिसी? किसान ने स्वीकार नहीं किया, किसान ने बगावत किया था और बोला था हम जाके ही छोड़ेंगे। उसके बाद वो राहत में आया, किस तरह जुल्म हुआ देखा। रास्ता में जुल्म हुआ, लाठी गोली सब कुछ का इस्तेमाल हुआ। नेशनल हाईवे के 3 फीट गहरा करके काट दिया कि हमारा गाड़ी ना आ सके, मगर किसान को रोक नहीं पाया। नरेंद्र मोदी शायद किसान को पहचान नहीं पाया था। किसान आगे बढ़ा, और जहां हम बोला था ये किसान आंदोलन शांतिपूर्ण आंदोलन है, शांतिपूर्ण रहेगा, और जहां हम मारपीट करने नहीं आया है, जहां रुकेंगे हम वहां बैठ जाएंगे। उसका अब देखा है, 1 साल 380 दिन किसान बैठे रहे। 5 नेशनल हाईवे जहां एंट्री दिल्ली का, वहां बैठ गया। और हम 0 डिग्री टेम्परेचर में वहां बैठा रहा। जब 0 डिग्री में दिल्ली में घर में नहीं रह सकता लोग, हम रास्ता में बैठा रहा। जब 44-48 डिग्री टेम्परेचर में एसी में दिल्ली में रह नहीं सकता, हम वहां बैठा रहा। जब 22 दिन लगातार बारिश हुआ, हम वहाँ बैठा रहा, हमारा सारे सुविधा छीना लिया गया। सब कुछ के बाद सरकार हमसे बात करके समाधान करना नहीं चाहा, मगर हम मीटिंग कुछ किया था, वो सिर्फ दिखाने के लिए, जनता को, देश को गुमराह करने के लिए, मगर उसमें समाधान करने का कोई नहीं था। मगर हम किसान बोला था हमारा मांग मिटने के बाद ही हम रुकेंगे। उसके बाद अब देखा है ये दुनिया का आज़ादी का बाद भारत में सबसे बड़ा किसान आंदोलन है, और इस समय का दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा जनवादी आंदोलन था। इतना लंबा आंदोलन, इतना कठिन आंदोलन हमारे इतिहास में नहीं है। इसलिए ग्रेट मैन जो नोआम चोम्स्की ने बताया था, आज किसान आंदोलन भारत का दुनिया का जन आंदोलन के सामने एक बेकन लाइट है। इस आंदोलन को हम आगे बढ़ाने की कोशिश किया। हमारा सबसे शांतिपूर्ण आंदोलन है। हमारा इतना बड़ा आंदोलन एक पत्ता तक तोड़ा नहीं, हम सबसे बड़ा शांतिपूर्ण आंदोलन था। मगर इसके बावजूद हमारा 716 साथी शहीद हो गया। फिर सरकार सुनने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। सरकार के पास शहीद का तालिका नहीं है। पार्लियामेंट में 1 मिनट का शोक प्रकट भी नहीं किया। जो अन्नदाता देश को बचाता है वो मर रहा है। 4 लाख से ज्यादा किसान खुदकुशी कर रहे हैं। आज भी रोज प्रतिदिन 52 किसान खुदकुशी कर रहा है, मगर हर सरकार का किसी का कोई चिंता नहीं है। इस परिस्थिति के मुकाबला किसान ने किया था। एक मोदी आने का बाद 8 साल को जो पाशविक राज चल रहा है, बर्बरता का राज चल रहा है, उन्होंने ऐलान किया था हम किसान को सबक सिखाएंगे। मगर किसान ने सोचा था कि हम भी मुकाबला करेंगे। 56 इंची छाती सीना दिखाया था, मगर किसान उसको छाती को चूहे का छाती में बदल दिया, उसको सर के झुका के माटी से मजबूर किया। और 19 नवंबर उसको मजबूर किया। ये काला कहाँ है कानून में, उसको असल में काला दिखा दिया और वो कानून को मजबूर हुआ उसको युद्ध करने के लिए। मगर इसको मालूम है वो आसानी से नहीं जाएगा। एक बार हार हुआ, मगर बाकी ये बदला लेने के काम कर रहा है किसान के खिलाफ। हमारा जो आगे मांग है उसको मानने के लिए तैयार नहीं है, ये चल रहा है। इसलिए किसान आंदोलन आने वाला दिन में चलेगा। मगर ये किसान आंदोलन हमारे देश के लिए एक नया रास्ता खोल दिया। सबका ऐसा आइडिया हो गया था मोदी के कोई हरा नहीं सकता, मोदी के जमाने में कोई आंदोलन नहीं हो सकता। मगर ये किसान आंदोलन प्रमाण कर दिया जितना भी ताकतवर हो उसके खिलाफ आंदोलन एकताबद्ध रूप से किया जाए तो उसको हरा सकता, जीत सकता। किसान आंदोलन ये नया उम्मीद पैदा किया पूरा देश के जनवादी आंदोलन के सामने। जब हम एकताबद्ध होके लड़ाई करेंगे तो जितना बड़ा तानाशाह हो उसको हम हरा सकता। ये नया एक पैगाम आंदोलन के सामने हम पेश किया है। इसलिए साथियों, नौजवान सभा के सामने एक सबसे बड़ा चुनौती है। आज जो समस्या सामना कर रहे हैं उसको लड़ने के लिए लड़की आपको दूर करना है। हम भीख मांग के कोई समस्या हल नहीं कर सकता। हम लड़ के, मर के, खून दे के हम आंदोलन को आगे बढ़ा सकता, दुश्मन को झुका सकता, अपना मांग आगे बढ़ा सकता। इसलिए किसान आंदोलन को जो हमारा अनुभव है इसको आगे ले जाना है। हम देख रहे हैं आज क्या हो रहा है। आपको मालूम है आज नरेंद्र मोदी इस तरह बांटने के लिए जात, धर्म, भाषा, सांप्रदायिकता को इस्तेमाल करके हमारा देश को बांटने का कोशिश कर रहा है, जनता को बांटने का कोशिश कर रहा है, जनवादी आंदोलन को कुचलने का कोशिश कर रहा है। एक नया हमला के सामने हमको नया तरीका से लड़ाई लड़ना पड़ेगा, नया सोच को लाना पड़ेगा। और नई पीढ़ी, नौजवान ये नया सोच लेने का, एक पैगाम लेने के, आगे बढ़ाने का आप इसको कहते हैं। हम कहते हैं नौजवान क्रांति का बानी वाहक है। आप क्रांति का बानी आज ले जाओ गांव गांव में, घर घर में, हर गरीब को इकट्ठा करके हम लड़ेंगे। और हम सब लीड छत्तापोंदा ने बोला ये नया एक माहौल शुरू हुआ है किसान मजदूर एकता का। किसान मजदूर के एकता के आधार पर जनवादी एकता बनेगा और वो जनवादी एकता ही हमारा देश में समाज बदलने का लड़ाई में एक कदम आगे बढ़ सकता। इसका शुरुआत हुआ है। आप इस लड़ाई को आगे बढ़ाइए और इस आंदोलन को आगे बढ़ा के नरेंद्र मोदी का जो राज है इसको आपको आगे हमको कैसे मुकाबला करेंगे देखना है। इसको शुरुआत है। अब देखा जहां ही धर्म के इस्तेमाल करके देश चलाया वहां राष्ट्र फेल हो गया। पाकिस्तान इस्लाम को इस्तेमाल करके फेल राष्ट्र है। श्रीलंका बुद्धिज्म का हिंदू के खिलाफ इस्तेमाल करके फेल स्टेट है, और यहाँ हिंदुज्म का इस्तेमाल करके राष्ट्र नीति चलाएगा। ये राष्ट्र भी फेल राष्ट्र होने के लिए मजबूर।
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
अनंदा माइक का चला गया, माइक का। इस आंदोलन को उम्मीद के साथ आप आगे बढ़ेंगे। किसान आपका साथ है, नौजवान ये लड़ाई में आगे बढ़ेंगे। ये उम्मीद के साथ हम आज आपको दोबारा लाल सलाम पेश करता हूं। आज नौजवान सभा एक नया फैसला करे और हमारा देश में जनवादी आंदोलन को एक नया सूरज को उठाने का एक परिस्थिति पैदा करे, ये हमारा उम्मीद है। इस उम्मीद के साथ मैं आपको अभिनंदन करके अपना बात खत्म करता हूं। इनकलाब जिंदाबाद।
Thank you, Comrade Hananullah. Comrade Nabran Deb, our All India Joint Secretary and the State Secretary of Tripura, now felicitate Comrade Hananullah.
This is a demonstration of Wirecast.
Now I would like to invite Comrade Mayug Biswas, the General Secretary of Students Federation of India, to deliver a speech.
Demonstration of Wirecast.
On behalf of Central Executive Committee of Student Federation of India, I'd like to pay my revolutionary greetings to the delegates, the organizers of the 11th DYFI All India Conference.
This is a demonstration of
SFI केंद्रीय कार्य निर्वाही कमेटी की तरफ से हम सभी को क्रांतिकारी अभिनंदन ज्ञापन करता है। पिया पेता सखा कले निंगल केंते बिप्लवा अयवादंगल वीर वाक्कम বিপ্লবা বান্দা নালু সবাইকে জানাই সংগ্রামী অভিনন্দন। We have thousands of languages in our country, cultures, religions. But what is the beauty of our country? जैसे शायर ने कहा था, चमन में इख्तिलाफ रंगबू से ही बात बनती है। हम ही हम हैं तो क्या हम हैं, तुम ही तुम हो तो क्या तुम हो। For that beauty lies in our diversity, and that diversity is which protects it, our constitution. The very constitution which is being targeted each and every minute in our country in this present period of time, in this darkest hour of our country. And right now, who are going to protect it? Our very constitution? Here. शहीद की अम्मी मां यहां पर बैठी है और वही हम लोग उम्मीद दिखाते हैं, सपने दिखाते हैं कैसे हम लोग लड़ सकते हैं कश्मीर से लेकर कन्याकुमारी का, कच्छ से लेकर कहिमा। यहां पर जब हम लोग यहां पर उपस्थित होते हैं, हम लोग देखते हैं जो एसएफआई डीवाईएफआई का जो ऑल इंडिया कॉन्फ्रेंस होते हैं, इट्स समथिंग लाइक रीयूनियन फॉर अस। आई कैन सी माय कॉमरेड्स who fight with us hand in hand in each and every battle of our country. और इसलिए तो जब हम DYFI का नाम लेते हैं उसके साथ SFI जुड़ जाते हैं हर एक लड़ाई में। वो काम की लड़ाई हो, वो शिक्षा के हक के लिए लड़ाई हो, हर एक बात में लड़ाई एक साथ हम लोग लड़ते हैं और जुड़ जाते हैं। और इसलिए देखिए कॉमरेड, और शहीद के साथ जब हम लोग लिस्ट देखते हैं, आप लोगों से हम लोग जो उम्मीद करते हैं कश्मीर में, जो हम लोग जब बार बार जाते हैं हम लोग सीखते हैं कश्मीर में। यहां पर मेरा साथी बैठे हैं, कॉमरेड अब्बास से जब बात करते हैं हम लोग तब सीखते हैं उसके सामने कैसे उनके भाई को खून कर दिया गया था, और जिन लोगों ने खून किया सरहद के उस पार से आके उनको खून कर दिया गया था उनके भाई को। और फिर भी हम लोगों को देश की कैंपस में एंटी नेशनल बुलाए जाते हैं। एंटी नेशनल कौन है? अब देखिए यहां पर उपस्थित है केरल का कॉमरेड। हर एक दिन, each and every day, they are fighting against the communal forces. They are fighting against the RSS, Muslim fundamentalists, Christian fundamentalists, each and every day. At the same time, we are fighting against those forces in the campuses also. The examples are there. शहीद का कोई धर्म नहीं होता है, कोई जात नहीं होता है, और शहीद सिर्फ हम लोगों को उम्मीद दिखाते हैं, और वो हम लोग आपसे सीखते हैं, DYFI से सीखते हैं। और हम लोग बार बार बोलते हैं, यहां पर इंटरनेशनल डेलीगेट्स भी आएगा, ये लड़ाई का कोई बॉर्डर भी नहीं होता है। और जब हम लोग ये बात कर रहे हैं, जो इंटरनेशनल सॉलिडारिटी भी हम लोग दिखाते हैं। अब क्यूबा से हम लोगों का कॉमरेड आएगा, कुछ दिन पहले पैलेस्टाइन में जो जर्नलिस्ट को खून कर दिया गया, सॉलिडारिटी कौन ज्ञापन करता है? SFI और DYFI सबसे पहले देश में करते हैं। लेकिन अभी जिस हालत में हम लोग यहां पर उपस्थित है कॉमरेड्स, 50% के ऊपर हमारा देश का जो आबादी है, 50% population of our country is aged less than 25 years. And the 65% population in our country, the aged is less than 35 years. So it means one can call us a Youngistan. But what is the situation of this Youngistan? They are talking about Make in India, but nothing is happening in our country. Because but if you see, be it in the Silicon Valley or anywhere under the sun, in this planet, you will find Indians who are working for the big corporates, or they are working as they have a good career everywhere. And the main reason behind that, a huge portion of them, they studied in the public institution, public funded institutions. And that public funded institution are being targeted each and every day in our country. Just see, we suffered the siege cuts. Now they are trying to implement it. National education policy NEET upon us. And we said it's not national education policy. We say it as national exclusion policy, because that policy actually excludes us, excludes to not only lakhs, crores of students of our country. You see the recent examples are there. Online education, we call it as the digital divide. At the same time, the way they are trying to cut the scholarships for the SC, ST population, the minority population, every day it's happening. So, the situation is such, our country has tremendous potentiality of the young people. But the problem is that demographic dividend has turned to be the demographic liability. And it is happening right now, everywhere, not only our institution. Look at the role of the railways. This role of the public funded institutions is disseminated. And that is why when the government is not investing money on these institutions, on social security, so there is naturally the situation is such that there is a lack of potential bias, and there is also affected the production system also. And that production system which has reduced right now, and now the situation is right now, our country turns from the cashless country to the jobless country. And that jobless, already Topona mentioned it, the quality of job has decreased. And this pandemic has also shown us, जो MA, MPhil, PhD करके लोग घूम रहे हैं, सिर्फ उसका काम क्या है, ओला, उबेर और छोटा मोटा ज़ोमैटो का काम कर रहा है शहर में। गांव का हालत देखिए, गांव के एक के बाद एक गांव खाली होते जा रहा है, क्योंकि वहां पर भी, यहां पर हन्नाना भी बोला, कृषि क्षेत्र में फॉरेन डायरेक्ट इन्वेस्टमेंट के बाद वो बेचने का काम कर रहा है वो लोग, और जहां पर ये, और उसके साथ ये भी हम लोग देख रहे हैं 100 दिन का काम जो होते हैं देश में, वो भी कम होते गया। तो कहां है जॉब? मोदी जी बात कर रहा है देश की तरक्की की बात कर रहा है। वो लोग झोला लेके तो चल पड़ा, झोला में पूरा देश को बेचने चल पड़ा। अब हम लोग तो पूछते हैं, ये मोदी जी का जो बड़े बड़े बात मोदी जी कहते हैं, वो मेक इन इंडिया के बाद उसका जो मेक इन इंडिया का जो स्टैच्यू बना है, वो जो स्टैच्यू ऑफ यूनिटी, वो तैयार कर रहा है चाइना। मोदी जी का बुलेट ट्रेन तैयार कर रहा है जापान। मोदी जी का सूट तैयार कर रहा है इंग्लैंड। तो हमारे देश में क्या हो रहा है? कुछ भी नहीं। इवन मेक इन इंडिया लोगो भी स्विट्जरलैंड तैयार कर रहा है। अब देखिए, जब हालत ऐसा हो रहा है, एक तो एग्जाम्पल ऐसा ही है, ये तमिलनाडु में 14 पोस्ट के लिए, स्वीपर पोस्ट के लिए 4600 लोग अप्लाई किया था। उसमें कई सारे इंजीनियर से, कई सारे पीएचडी होल्डर है। और यहां पर कुछ दिन पहले बिहार और उत्तर प्रदेश में एसएफआई डीवाईएफआई में भी बहुत सारे जगह प्रोटेस्ट में उपस्थित थे। वहां पर कई हजार नौकरी के लिए करोड़ों अप्लाई किया था। पूरा बिहार यूपी जल रहा था। उसमें इंटरवेंशन हम लोगों को और भी करना है, हम लोग करेंगे, ये हम उम्मीद करते हैं। और बात एक्चुअली यही है कॉमरेड, जो लोग पढ़ के ये शिक्षित हो रहा है, the quality of jobs decreased. At the same time, you can understand the number of working students are also increasing. And they are the soft target of capital. We have already seen recently the crisis in Ukraine. यूक्रेन का क्राइसिस हम लोगों को दिखा दिया। हजार नहीं, लाखों के तादाद में लोग पढ़ने के लिए जाते हैं यूक्रेन और रशिया जैसा ईस्टर्न यूरोपियन कंट्रीज में, जहां पर अभी भी पुराना जो समाजवादी जो व्यवस्था था, उसके असर अभी तक है। शिक्षा सस्ता है, लेकिन वहां पर लोग पढ़ने के लिए गया था, क्योंकि यहां पर शिक्षा इतना महंगा हो गया है। नीट पास करके भी लोग जाने के लिए मजबूर हो रहा है। जब यही बात हो रहा है, और जब ये, जैसे हम लोगों ने कहा था, our population could have been a potential, there's huge potentiality, there is a huge potentiality in our population, but वो liability हो गया है। इसलिए DYFI SFI हम लोग जब कन्वेंशन किए थे, we gave a slogan for the country when they are trying to divide us in the name of religion, in the name of caste. Our slogan was, धर्म के नाम पे मत तोड़ो, नौजवानों को रोजगार से जोड़ो। It was our clarion call of SFI and DYFI. धर्म के नाम पे मत तोड़ो, नौजवानों को रोजगार से जोड़ो। अब अभी जहां पर एनईपी में जॉब कटौती हो रहा है, लेकिन उसके साथ साथ उम्मीद तो है हम लोगों के सामने। जैसे किसान मूवमेंट करके दिखाया, हम लोग SFI DYFI हम लोग एक इकट्ठा थे, वहां पर सॉलिडारिटी कैंपेन किए थे वहां पर उस मूवमेंट पे, और उन्होंने दिखाया ये बात, What Parliament can do, streets can undo। और वही बात हम लोग को, यही उम्मीद लेकर हम लोगों को चलना पड़ेगा। जो फैज साहब जो कहा था बहुत दिन पहले, झुकेगा जुल्म का परचम यकी आज भी है, झुकेगा जुल्म का परचम यकी आज भी है, मेरी ख्यालों की दुनिया हंसी आज भी है। बहुत हवाएं चली मेरे रुख बदलने को, मगर निगाह में वो सरजमीन आज भी है। वो सरजमीन वही है जब हम लोग आज देखते हैं, कुछ काल देखते हैं, पंडित शिव कुमार के अंतिम संस्कार के वक्त में भी वहां पर उपस्थित था उस्ताद जकीर हुसैन। यही हमारा हिंदुस्तान, यही हमारा देश, और इस देश को बचाना पड़ेगा। इसके लिए कश्मीर से लेकर कन्याकुमारी, कच्छ से लेकर कहिमा से आए हुए सभी नौजवान साथी को यही कॉन्फ्रेंस से हम लोगों को शपथ लेना पड़ेगा। ये शपथ होगा सबके लिए शिक्षा, सबके लिए काम, सबके लिए शिक्षा के लिए हम लोग एक इकट्ठा लड़ाई करेंगे। और यूनाइटेड मूवमेंट, ये जो हम लोगों का लड़ाई का क्षेत्र है, उसको और भी बड़ा करेंगे। बाकी जो भी जितना भी प्रोग्रेसिव स्टूडेंट्स ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, डेमोक्रेटिक स्टूडेंट्स ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, यूथ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, हम लोग को एक इकट्ठा करना पड़ेगा। और इस लड़ाई को हम लोग को जीतना ही पड़ेगा। अगर हम लोग ये लड़ाई जीत नहीं पाएंगे तो इतिहास हम लोग को क्षमा नहीं कर पाएगा। तो इसी बात के साथ आप सभी को ये उम्मीद को लेकर आप लोगों का ये जो सम्मेलन है, ये सक्सेसफुल होगा, ये पूरा उम्मीद हम लोगों को है ये SFI की तरफ से। तो यही बात करके आप सभी को क्रांतिकारी अभिनंदन फिर से ज्ञापन करता हूं। इनकलाब जिंदाबाद।
Thank you, comrade. An announcement for the delegates, comrade Abhay will do.
अच्छा कॉमरेड, हमारा जो लंच ब्रेक था 1:30, बट 1 बजे लंच ब्रेक होगा, 2:30 विल स्टार्ट आवर सेशन। But 1:30 p.m. one exhibition is open here. एक एग्जीबिशन हमारे रिसेप्शन कमेटी ने किया है, यह उद्घाटन 1:30 बजे होगा। एक एग्जीबिशन है अचीवमेंट ऑफ लेफ्ट फ्रंट गवर्नमेंट इन वेस्ट बंगाल, 34 इयर्स लेफ्ट फ्रंट गवर्नमेंट का। नंबर 2, रोल ऑफ कम्युनिस्ट मूवमेंट इन ऑफ बंगाल ऑफ फ्रीडम स्ट्रगल, एंड थर्ड स्ट्रगल सैक्रिफाइस, और हमारा DYFI वेस्ट बंगाल का जो प्रेजेंट टाइम में जो स्ट्रगल है इसके ऊपर, ये तीनों एग्जीबिशन 1:30 बजे ये ZCC के जहां हमारा फूड कोर्ट है, द फ्रंट ऑफ द फूड कोर्ट, द एग्जीबिशन विल इनॉग्रेट बाय आवर ex-SFI लीडर कॉमरेड गौतम देव। I request all delegates you should attend this opening program of our 3 exhibitions. This is my announcement.
Comrade, now the inaugural session is over. Our conference is adjourned for lunch and will resume at 2:30. You please note the time, 2:30 p.m.